I love football, and yeah, a lot of the times football doesn't love me back. All pun intended for my glorious king, Jordan Love. Regardless, hello everybody, and welcome to the Toss-Up. I'm Joe Cronin. If you couldn't figure it out, we're talking professional pigskin, yes, the NFL. Stick around, roll that intro, because it's all next on the Toss-Up. Despite 5 weeks of the season already being done, yeah, the NFL season really moves at light speed. It seems like it's only just begun. Each week of the NFL year brings new storylines, highlights, breaking news, and more, as just this week the first firing of a head coach occurred. While we can't talk about everything in the NFL, there's certainly a lot to discuss in the football world, and here to talk shop along with me is Thomas Crow, Coby Robbins, and Preston Andrews. Gentlemen, who's excited to talk some ball?
Let's talk ball, Jason.
Great. Yeah, it's exciting. Week 5 already in the books. Week 6 on the horizon. Thomas, you first. What has stood out? What's been the most surprising thing from this NFL season?
You know, I think the most surprising thing for me is the NFC West as a whole division. You look at Jaden Daniels. He is the front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year. They're leading the division at 4-1. Dallas, just escaped a win on Monday Night Football, moved up to now 3-2. They could easily be 2-3. You look at the Eagles, they're 2-2 coming off a bye. They're not really playing great offense. Sirianni, some rumors are swirling around about him already. And then you look at the Giants. The Giants were a team that everyone thought might have the first pick overall. They're not even playing awful football. Daniel Jones is
he's hooping.
He's only turned the ball over twice on the season. I look at the NFC West as really a division that I don't think anyone expected to come out this way.
They've come together a little more. I mean, just a couple years ago, they were called the NFC least, just because every team, I believe, was under 500. Preston, what stood out the most from these first 5 weeks?
Yeah, I'm going to stay in the NFC, but it's the NFC's only undefeated team left, right? I think it's the Minnesota Vikings, 5-0, big win in London, and I think Kevin O'Connell really hit it on the head when he said, teams don't fail, or quarterbacks don't fail young teams, teams fail young quarterbacks. Sam Darnold, 1 interception on the year through the first 4 weeks. He's perfect, 11 touchdowns. How about Brian Flores' defense as well? They've faced Brock Purdy, Jordan Love, C.J. Stroud, and Aaron Rodgers. Love's throws 3 picks. I know you're probably not very happy about that, Joe. They picked Rodgers off 3 times. Andrew Van Ginkel, that's only the 6th pick 6 that Aaron Rodgers has ever thrown in his career. They're giving up 15.2 points a game to these elite offenses. C.J. Stroud only puts up 7 against them. And is the NFC North going to be tough as they continue to play? Absolutely. But with playmakers like Justin Jefferson and veterans on the back end like Harrison Smith and Stephon Gilmore and that coaching staff in Minnesota, and O'Connell's been through it in 2 years, right? He goes from Kirk to whatever last year was of the quarterback situation to a veteran Sam Darnold. Flores was former head coach. I think Minnesota starting 5-0 may be a surprise to most, but inside that locker room, I think they believe that they had what it takes to maybe win the North this year.
A couple things with that. I mean, one with the belief in a young guy like Darnold. I imagine how the Panthers feel, having Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold at one point. Those two are playing like some of the best 2 quarterbacks in the league. And then Kevin O'Connell, he just runaway coach of the year through 5 weeks. So Coby, biggest surprise so far?
So I want to talk about the negative aspect, the Cleveland Browns. They were a team, Kevin Stefanski was the coach of the year, Joe Flacco comeback player of the year. High hopes. They've been trying to get at it the last couple of years. Deshaun Watson, huge contract. I don't think anyone would disagree with me when I say that it's the worst contract I've ever seen in American and total world sports. And they're 1-4. They have no identity. They're going to be a top 5 pick. You have to put in Jameis Winston, but that's not even going to solve the problem. You have a great coach in Kevin Stefanski, and fans are just, they have bags over their heads again. You've always seen those memes from 2009 for the Lions, or 2017, 2016 for the Browns. And the Browns finally had hope with Baker Mayfield. And then when they try to make a splash, that's when ownership gets in the way. And this happens time and time and again when ownership, I'm not going to call it Jerry Jones, but that's what he does. There's a reason why these teams aren't successful. There's a GM, an owner, and a coach. That's 3 different operations of the system. When it's one thing, you're not going to win a Super Bowl, and that's evident.
Do you think that Chubb coming back changes anything?
I think it does because he's a power runner and he's quick. I mean, he's one of the best running backs in the league, and I know he's coming back soon, but the only thing it'll do is slow down the offense. I think that maybe they'll be able to stay in these games 13, 16, maybe get to 20 points, which they haven't gotten to this year, which is pretty remarkable, but they probably won't get that many wins, and it's unfortunate because they had the top defense last year.
Been seeing a lot circulating with the Browns. I mean, Kevin Stefanski seems like he's sticking with Deshaun Watson. He looks horrible. Like, he's had 2 games already as a sub-10 QBR, and I believe he's the only quarterback in the league to do that. $230 million for 5 years, and this is the performance he's getting. I mean, 2019 was a long time ago for Watson. But, Coby, I want to send it back to you, considering the talk of coaches. Stefanski is a guy that's kind of been circulating with this hot seat. Robert Saleh recently fired this week from the Jets, as Ulbrich will take over the DC for the Jets for the remainder of the season, or if they figure something out. Is there anyone else you see on the hot seat that could be the next up to get fired this year?
It's interesting. At the beginning of the year, I wouldn't have mentioned Zach Taylor's name in that coaching carousel of possible firings, but they're 1-4 right now. And Burrow and Chase have gotten on the same page. It's been pretty incredible to see, to be honest, because I feel like, at the beginning of the year, there was a lot of miscommunication. There were a couple of games where Chase even went under 50 yards, but clock management. And I don't know if you guys saw last week, I can't remember exactly what time it was, but it was late in the game. They had an opportunity, Evan McPherson. And yes, there was a fumbled snap that happens, but they didn't put themselves in a position to get an under 50-yard field goal. There was a lot of runs, playing conservative. And when you have a player like Jamar Chase on a 3rd down, why don't you throw it to a boundary, incomplete or complete? With those great receivers, those top 5 guys, it's not going to be picked off. And I just felt that Zach Taylor's played a bit conservative in all the games he played, and he's fighting for his job. If they don't make the playoffs, this is another year, Super Bowl aspirations from 3 years ago that hasn't been successful.
This team is way too talented to be 1-4. Any other coach on the hot seat, Preston?
Yeah, I just would like to mention with Cincinnati, Zach Taylor being an offensive guy, that defense is just awful.
Yeah.
Ranked 26th in the league. Granted, I know they've got the Giants and Browns coming up, so hopefully that can be a little bit of a get-right time for them. But speaking of a team that needs a get-right, this Indianapolis Colts defense is, well, they're on pace to be the 2nd worst Colts defense to ever exist, right, in franchise history. They're giving up 420 total yards a game, 270 passing, and if my math is right, that means they're still getting their ball ran on them for 150 yards down their throat, right? And, you can argue that it's personnel and roster construction, but in the middle, as far as the run game goes, you've got DeForest Buckner, who's an all-pro. Granted, he's on IR, but Grover Stewart's making $10 million a year. You'd think that would be able to shore up your run defense a little bit. They've got first-rounders on both edges with Kwity Paye. Latu on the right side was the first defensive player taken in the draft this year, and they go to Jacksonville, and they're only able to pressure the quarterback 1 time, and that's an 0-4 team, right? So Gus Bradley's got to do something to figure this out. Secondary's not very good either. Do you guys know who Jalen Jones is? That's their number 1 corner, a 6th rounder from Texas A&M, right? And that's no knock to Jones, he's forced turnovers, but if he's your number 1, who in the world is your number 2, right? Ballard brings Sam Womack off the street from San Francisco.
You seem like you got a lot of pent-up here about how the Colts
I'm
started.
sweating profusely right now, right? Because I think you look at Shane Steichen and even Joe Flacco, and it's like that game against Jacksonville specifically, you only get so many games a year where you get like gifts, right? And for your backup quarterback to come in and score 34 points and to waste that performance, especially against an 0-4 team and an offense in Trevor Lawrence that has not looked good all year. Gus Bradley, if he's not on the hot seat right now, I'm not sure what more it's going to take.
Yeah, Gus Bradley, especially those first 2 weeks was when I was like, what? I mean, they played the Packers with Malik Willis as the starting quarterback.
And that's when it was the run defense,
What, 200 rushing yards in the first quarter, something ridiculous like that. Thomas, round out the hot seat of coaches.
Yeah, I agree. I think Gus Bradley looks terrible, but the disrespect to Jalen Jones doesn't seem warranted. Jalen Jones is playing like a baller right now. That's the one bright side.
It's a tough spot
on
to
the
be
Colts
for.
defense,
Yeah.
exactly. When I think of a coach on the hot seat, I think of a coach that can't make decisions, can't really win over the locker room, and doesn't really know what's going on. I see Antonio Pierce as that guy. He can't decide who he wants at quarterback. They named O'Connell today. It was Minshew at the beginning of the year. They have a good win against the Ravens, but that's kind of the parody of the NFL. Sometimes it just goes your way. I don't know if he really has much control in the locker room. Devontae Adams wants out.
Yep.
I think that he was meant to be an interim. I think he did an okay job last year as an interim, but I don't think that role should have ever advanced beyond the interim role.
That one was always shocking when they promote him head coach. I understand the players really loved him, and that had a big say with it, especially after the way, Josh McDaniels kind of tanked that organization.
Rubbed
You
some
saw how
people
much
the
they
wrong way.
celebrated when Antonio Pierce won. But just he doesn't have the X's and O's that's required. Like you can't mask being a player's coach without the ability to have some sort of X's and O's. And
Exactly.
they've just been struggling. Want to segue a little bit into a segment, Pretenders and Contenders. We're going around. Each of us have one division from the NFC and AFC. Thomas, I want to start it with you. You're taking over the AFC and NFC South to give your pretenders and contenders from those divisions.
Where should we start, AFC?
We'll go AFC to start it up.
So AFC South, we're going to start with our contender, not just in the AFC South, but I think a contender to maybe win the Super Bowl is Houston. The numbers speak for itself. I think Nico Collins going on IR hurts their offense, but I don't think it changes much. It's going to be a couple weeks. He'll come back strong. Houston is a very good team. Now pretenders, I want to say it's
The rest
Indianapolis.
of the division?
You're not wrong there either, Joe. Will Levis can't do much for Tennessee, but I look at Jacksonville as really the pretenders. They came into the season. People thought they were potentially a wild card team, and their defense is horrible. Lawrence really doesn't look good. There's no cohesion. There's no offensive or defensive development under Doug Peterson. I'm surprised Doug Peterson didn't
Yeah,
get
he
mentioned
was
at all.
another one.
Yeah.
I think Doug Peterson is out relatively soon. So Houston, Jacksonville.
All right, Preston, you got the AFC North.
Yeah, I think the big thing that stands out for me in this division is just how good Baltimore's been, right? I think they're absolutely contenders. Took them a little bit of a while to figure out that run game. That defense is a typical Harbaugh defense, though. Those guys are legit inside with Roquan Smith in the middle. Kyle Hamilton's turned into one of the best players in the back end of a defense in the NFL at safety. And then offensively, you've got Lamar. Now that Ronnie Stanley at left tackle's figured out how to line up properly on sides after week one, Lindbrom in the middle at center, Derrick Henry. I think the thing about this team is just that toughness travels, right? And so that's something that I think come playoff time, come cold weather in Baltimore, I like the Ravens quite a bit. And then I'm really selling Pittsburgh right now. That's an offense with Najee Harris that's averaging 3.3 yards a carry. They can't get any movement up front. Where are the explosive plays, right? Through 4 weeks, they had targeted beyond the sticks in the air the second fewest times of anybody in the NFL. And to make matters worse, George Pickens doesn't want to be there anymore now, right? So you're going to be throwing to Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin, and not to mention who's going to be throwing to him, right? Russell Wilson was a full participant in practice for the first time today. The defense will always be there for Pittsburgh, but they just don't have enough offensively to really put any defense on their toes. And so I'm selling Pittsburgh big time.
There's something about the Pittsburgh receiving room and divas. It's like clockwork.
Yes.
Kobe, make it snappy. You got the AFC East on you.
So, the AFC East, after Tom Brady left, was supposed to be the division, Dolphins, Jets, Bills to capitalize. They haven't. And I think that it starts with the Bills. The Bills haven't been that successful in the playoffs, but they look great the first 3 weeks. I'm honestly not so worried about them moving forward. They're going to win the division. The Dolphins, Jets, and Patriots aren't really contenders. I would like to see more, Josh Allen finding Dalton Kincaid. Me as, a fantasy fan myself, I drafted Dalton Kincaid. Has not been productive. I think it's so important for them to spread the ball around. Shakir, Curtis Samuel, keep handing the ball off to James Cook, so underrated. Their defense is kind of mediocre at this point. I think that their front seven has really improved, but in the back end, their secondary, they really need to lock in. Because when you're playing these teams, Chiefs, Ravens, the Ravens game a couple weeks ago, I feel like I've always had this mentality that great teams don't get blown out. And maybe I'm speaking from a Patriots perspective, because I cried when I was younger when they lost the Super Bowl, and I'm like, oh, whatever, all these teams that won 3 games, you should be happy, right? But I think that it is evident that sometimes they lose their way, and it really translates to the whole game. But I think that, the pretenders, everyone in that division, and the extreme pretender is the Jets. I don't care what anyone says. This criticism should be, in my opinion, the majority of Aaron Rodgers. People can say, oh, he was put into this situation. He put himself into the situation. He's 40 years old, coming off an Achilles injury. I understand that, but he's not leading the offense. Communication with receivers is mostly on the quarterback. And remember, he went to Europe in the offseason. When we're talking about communication, there is no excuse when you're not in training camp.
I saw something about Rodgers. He just always continues to amaze me with some of the things he does. I'll round up the AFC West. That is Chiefs. Can't count them out. They're 5-0. And then the Chargers. I don't really see a lot from them. They're able to win some games, but not enough. Moving on to the NFC, I'll take the NFC West real quick. I think the Seahawks are big pretenders. They might be on top of the division right now, but they're not going to win it. The Cardinals are the contenders of that division. I think they got the best quarterback in that division with Kyler Murray.
Baker Mayfield in the NFC South. He's snazzy. He's poised. I think Tampa Bay not only is going to win that division, I think Tampa Bay is a real legit contender in the NFC. And on the inverse of that, I think Atlanta's fake. I think Atlanta's a pretender. I think signing Kirk Cousins, that
Big
kind of
Kirko.
deal, coming off the Achilles, yeah, he played well. He threw for 500 or something last week. That makes me look bad, but I just don't buy it. I don't think that that defense works. I don't think the offense is going to be sustainable through 17 weeks. I think Atlanta doesn't make the playoffs.
Preston, NFC North, make it quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Talked about Minnesota earlier. Going to jump right back to Detroit. They were there last year, right? And I feel like they patched up some things on the back end. They need Terry and Arnold to come along defensively. And offensively, they've taken on the identity of their coach. They're going to run you over behind that big offensive line. It was evident in week 1 and overtime when they came out and didn't throw the ball and beat LA. So Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. I'm buying Detroit. Selling Chicago just because I think they're the worst team in a really, really good division. I don't think Shane Waldron is going to be able to make the appropriate adjustments to develop Caleb Williams. He's a guy that could be on the hot seat as well.
Round it out.
I'm all in on Jaden Daniels, and the only reason I say that is because they have the best coach, Dan Quinn, and the best offense coordinator in their division, Cliff Kingsbury.
All right, that's going to wrap up the first segment. We'll be back for a brand new second on the toss-up, so don't go anywhere.
The Toss-Up, Fridays on IUSTV.
Welcome back to the Toss-Up. We're going to continue this awesome NFL discussion with a hot take segment called Pump the Brakes. How it works is I'm going to share what I consider a hot take for this NFL season. And if one of my panelists disagree, they're going to have me, pump the brakes with the right foot and explain what I said was so outlandish. Gentlemen, are you ready?
Let's roll.
Got 6 ones on the board. The first, the Bengals. They will finish the season 9-3 or better in the remaining games and make the playoffs. Does everyone thinks that's possible? You disagreeing?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
pumping the brakes. They
Someone's
can't
gotta
stop anybody.
No.
Right? Who's going to stop anybody? And it's not like they're playing a weak division either. I could see Pittsburgh stealing one against them. I think Baltimore's going to get another one. So, yeah, I'm pumping the brakes big time. 9-3, maybe not. 7-5, sure. Yeah.
Ooh.
You were just so high on the Ravens. They almost lost to the Ravens this week.
Yeah, but they didn't.
I guess he's right.
That's right.
He's not wrong.
Winning is
they're not
hard. Now,
gonna-
moving on. Geno Smith currently leads the league in passing yards. Will he end up as the season leader at the end of Week 18?
Yes, because I feel like
Yes.
because they're going to be down a lot of games, and I think that their offense, DK Metcalf, has shown so much. People don't talk about him since a couple years ago, injuries. Maybe he's not this top-tier receiver, but, he's in that top 15, and they pass the ball a lot. Also with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet kind of being in and out of the injury report, they're going to pass the ball, going to be down. Decent, team all around them. He'll lead the league.
Number 3 on the board. The hot young Commanders. They will host and win a playoff game. Everyone agree? Okay.
They don't win a playoff game. They host one, but I think the NFC is strong, and I think the NFC has a lot of veteran quarterbacks, a lot of veteran coaches. I think that Washington doesn't have an incredible home field advantage. I think someone goes in there and beats them.
I did some digging for this next one. So the past 4 seasons in the NFL, there's always been a team like this. Last year was the Eagles. They were 10-1, lost their first playoff game. Year before was the Vikings, 13-4, lost their first playoff game. 2021 Cardinals, they started 7-0, lost their first playoff game. And the 2020 Steelers were 11-0, lost their first playoff game. The Minnesota Vikings are 5-0. Do they have the good team curse?
Are you saying
They will make the playoffs but lose that first playoff game after this hot start that they're on?
Yeah, they do. Because I'm just looking back to a couple years ago when they lost to the Giants. I think Kevin O'Connell's a great coach. If I have a quarterback, I want him in that system. Anyone, but, there's a lot of veteran teams. I also trust Matt LaFleur and the Packers and Dan Campbell, the Lions, that division. They're not going to win the division, and I think they may get a wild card, but it'll probably be a first-round exit.
Keep it in the NFC North. The Lions, they break through and make the Super Bowl.
Yes.
Yes?
I didn't mean to pump that. Yes, they do.
Okay. All right, wow, Dan Campbell. That would be exciting, wouldn't it? Biting some kneecaps at the biggest stage. The final one, the team we've talked about, really none, thankfully, but you got to ask. The Chiefs complete the three-peat.
Baltimore.
Baltimore?
Detroit.
Detroit? Whoa.
They do complete the three-peat because I just cannot bet against Patrick Mahomes. I've done it too many times. Even though Rasheed Rice and all these guys are out, I saw Juju, who I thought's been out of the league for the last couple of years. You know, was in the Patriots, did nothing last year, but had 130 receiving yards. He can make any bum off the street become an incredible receiver.
What are you pumping the brakes? Or are you?
It's hard because the snazzy pick is to choose the three-peat, but it would be pure cattywampus if they were able to win 3 in a row. But that's going to wrap it up for this week's show. As always, continue the discussion and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at IUSTV Sports. With that, there's one thing left to do. I kicked it last week because it was soccer, so this time I'll throw it, toss it up. Well, land in my lap. I don't know. We'll see you next week.
Oh,